Hi everyone, I want to try to make a video. I'm sorry it's been a while since my last video, but I had an abscess tooth and I was in a lot of pain, and I eventually ended up getting a root canal, and so now I'm starting to feel a little bit better, so I want to try to make a video. And there's been a lot of things that I've been wanting to talk about. There's just so much evidence for the year 2017. In my opinion, it's just overwhelming. But in this video, I wanted to go back to the Garden of Eden because there's something interesting that I saw in a video. I'm just going back to the latest thing that I've seen, and one of the latest things that I've seen is this video that was by Jonathan Kleck over here called On the Verge. And as you can see, I commented on the video. It was about 3 hours ago. I left a comment, but I wanted to elaborate on this comment because what happened is he saw, or he had a billboard put up behind his house, the latest billboard, and it was about a drug, and the name of the drug was SHROUD, and as you can see, it has the word key here, and then the letter Y looks like a crucifixion, and it's two different colors, so it seems to represent the two DNA. And he said that God told him to look up the word, and when he looked it up, and when he looked up the definition of this drug, he saw that it works with this other drug over here called lambrolizumab. And so he pointed out how it has the word lamb in it, and also has the beginning of the word lizard. So again, it seems to represent the two different types of DNA, basically the curse of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was in Genesis 2:17. But what I pointed out in the comment is that the first part of this word, the word lambro, it actually means, I'll just show it to you over here in the Blue Letter Bible. It means shining, brilliant, clear, transparent, splendid. And it's the word that's used to describe the white linen. It also describes the robe that they put on Jesus in Luke 23:11, which I've pointed out before, how this would be a representation of DNA, or reference to DNA because of the numbers 23 and 11. Oh, and also wanted to point out that the video is actually, it's interesting that the video was 23 minutes and 24 seconds, which is significant. I'll talk about that as well. But as you can see, this is the word that describes the white linen. Over here in Revelation 15:6, it says, and the seven angels came out of the temple having the seven plagues, clothed in pure and white linen, having their breasts girded with golden girdles. You see it again over here in Revelation 18, which I believe this is talking about Mystery Babylon over here. But in Revelation 19, it's saying, and to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And then again over here it's talking about the river of life, and it's making reference, and again this is in Revelation 22, which I've made a video about a table that I did where I wanted to confirm that the tree of life and the river of life is a representation of DNA. And so I had put in the words tree of life and river of life and DNA strand, and as you can see, this came up in Genesis 2:14 through Genesis 2:24, and the word strand was coming up right over here in the blue. You can see it coming up in ELS form, and it comes up in the last verse over here where it says, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And this is exactly what I wanted to talk about, because I believe that's what this is a representation of. And so this is what I wanted to elaborate on, because as you can see, this looks like the letter Y, but it also looks like Jesus on the cross. And this would represent the Y chromosome, and then this would represent the egg. And if you're familiar with Ron Wyatt's testimony, and I'll put the link to this video in the description box, there's a part 2 as well, but you'll know that when they examined Jesus' blood that was found on the Ark of the Covenant that he had discovered, they told him that this blood had 24 chromosomes. So it had 23 chromosomes from the mother, which was Mary, and then God provided the Y chromosome, which determined the sex of the baby. So it's what gave Jesus his maleness, but all the other chromosomes came from the mother. So he was the only blood in the world that had 24 chromosomes. It's also interesting that Jesus' blood was AB positive, and this is another video, and I can put the link to this video in the description box as well. But this is the rarest blood type, but it's interesting that it's AB, which would be the first part of the word Abba, and it's actually Jesus' blood that restores the DNA. So this would be the half that's restored. Because I've talked about how God's name is symmetrical, so the word Abba would be A-B, and then B-A, and the word Yahweh is also like a two-part word, and I believe that even God's name is a representation of the DNA, and so when the DNA gets restored, it's actually Jesus' blood that will restore the part of the DNA that's corrupted, and so that it will be symmetrical. I've also talked about how Eve's name is symmetrical as well. And you can see Eve's name over here. It's the word Hava in the Hebrew, but you can see how it's symmetrical in the English, but it's also symmetrical in the Hebrew. It's interesting that even the Strong's number is symmetrical, and that it's 23 frontwards and backwards, because again, I believe this is all a picture of the restored DNA. But the point that I wanted to make is that this is how the DNA was actually restored when Jesus died on the cross, and his blood is what restores the DNA, and it's actually the Y chromosome that was added to Eve's or Mary's DNA, which was all a picture of what happened in the garden with Adam and Eve, and it's also all a picture of what will happen at the restoration, which is what I wanted to talk about. And then I'll talk a little bit more about this comment, because I haven't even explained what I mentioned in this comment over here about the word completely yet, because I wanted to talk about the significance of this imagery over here. But if you go back to Genesis 2:22, which incidentally, negative 222 is the year that creation began. According to the Hebrew calendar, that would be the Hebrew year that correlates to the year 3983, which is the year that Pastor Sandy Armstrong had come up with for the beginning of creation, and it works out to exactly 6,000 years to the year 2017. And this is something I've talked about before, how I looked up the year to try to confirm it, and that's when I realized that in the Hebrew, it was on the Hebrew calendar, it's the year negative 222, and then of course it ends with the Hebrew year 5777. But what's significant about this verse is that this is where it said, "And the rib which the Lord God had taken from the man made he a woman, and he brought her unto the man." And I believe that the rib actually, or the ribs, the 24 ribs that are in a human body, actually represent chromosomes. And just like Jesus had 24 chromosomes. Jesus is the last Adam. I believe the first Adam had 24 chromosomes because the extra chromosome that God gave to Adam, which was the rib that he gave to the woman, would have been the extra chromosome. And then once he gave that chromosome to Eve, then they would both have 23 chromosomes. So just like Jesus had 24, the first Adam had 24. In his case, he had an extra X chromosome, which he would have given to Eve and to create the woman, and then they both end up with 23 chromosomes. And then you see that in the next verse it says, and Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of the man." So at this point they both have the 23 chromosomes. And then it says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and he shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." And so this is the joining together. But the process begins over here in verse 22 because there's 22 autosomes in the human body, and then the 23rd would be the X or the Y chromosome, and that's the chromosome that determines a person's sex. But I've mentioned before that I believe that the number 22 represents the restoration, because we will all share the 22 chromosomes of Christ DNA, and then the 23rd depends on the person's sex. So that necessarily will not be identical, but the 22 will be identical, and I believe that's why there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which correspond with the 22 almond cups in the menorah. And there's also 3 sets of 22 chapters or 22 books in the Bible, which make up the 66 books of the Bible. And it's interesting that the book Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, is the 22nd book in the Bible, and that's all about love. It's all about the bride and the bridegroom. It's a representation of Jesus being the bridegroom and the bride being the church, and this is in chapter 22. And ironically, it's in Matthew 22 when Jesus said that there's no marrying in heaven. It says, "For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven." But this is actually the chapter that was all about the marriage. It was all about the wedding, is what this chapter is talking about primarily. It says, "And Jesus answered and spake unto them again in parables, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king which made a marriage for his son." And it goes on to talk about how Jesus' coming back is like a marriage and a wedding. It's the wedding supper of the Lamb. It's talked about here in Matthew 22. Okay, so getting back to Genesis 2:22, something I noticed some time ago is over here where it says, "And the rib which the Lord God had taken from the man made he a woman." Well, this word made, I first noticed it in the Greek, but it means the same thing in the Hebrew as well, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I noticed this word over here in the Greek, which is the word, over here it says okodomisen. Okay, so that would be this word right here, but it's also pronounced this way. This one is ikodomel. It's the same word, same Strong's number 3618. And so when you look at this word right here, it's actually the word that you get economics from, but this word means erect or build a building or build a house. So it means to build, and it means the same thing in the Hebrew as well. So God was actually building a house. He was building the church when he made Eve. And so God could have just stopped with Eve if he just wanted to make a bride for his son, but he wanted there to be a great multitude, but I'm about out of time, so I have to continue in the next video. Thank you.